So guys, a security expert has come out to explain reasons why the United States envoy met with Miyetti Allah. Don't forget that headline trended recently, and Nigerians were wondering why the United States of America chose to speak with the Miyetti Allah. This is a group, or the headers, that have been designated as terrorist group. Why are they speaking with them? So we all know that recently Nigeria has suffered a lot at the hands of these headers coming from Fulani, and guess what? Majority of the northern leaders decided to stay mum. I mean, they kept quiet. Nobody is speaking up. Nobody is warning that, nobody is condemning. Nobody came out to condemn. Nobody is even condemning what the Fulani headsmen have been doing. You must have seen the video of someone from Benue State lamenting how they are being forced to leave their community. I mean, you need to see the video. Everywhere has been deserted because Fulanis must come to stay there. People who are said not to be Nigerians, they are coming from all over the world just to find their feet in another man's community, and they've taken over these communities. The northern leaders are all silent. Nobody is talking. Even the government of the day is not talking about displaced people, the IDP camps. There is no plan by this government, only for us to hear that the United States envoy was coming to speak with the Miyetti Allah leader. So Nigerians began to wonder why this meeting. I'm going to allow you to take a look at what the security expert has got to say. He said he was part of the meeting. Now take your time, watch this video, and let me know if you justified that gathering, because guess what? It's because they not keep pampering all this. Don't forget that before now, people like Buhari supported Boko Haram. They said any attack on Boko Haram is attack on the north. Even the Sultan of Sokoto, there's this headline of his, saying that the Boko Haram shouldn't be clamped on. Now it has become a threat. You must have seen how many times they've attacked the base, the military base in Borno State. The armory, the weapons, and so many soldiers have gone because of these people, because they were pampered from the beginning. Now these headers are coming in. They are being pampered in the name of it is their culture to move around. They don't have to stay at a place. So guys, let me just allow you to take a look at this and let me know your honest reaction in the comment section below. Now take a look.
You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Well, security, or the lack thereof, has become such a topical issue in Nigeria that no week passes by without one unfortunate incident or the other provoking another level of discourse about it. This past week, there were quite a few of those incidents. One took place in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State in Nigeria's northeast, where some residents are now asking the federal government to relocate the Giwa Barracks armory in the aftermath of recent weapons explosions that caused widespread panic and chaos among the local population. In the event that the barracks cannot be relocated, then they want it modified and equipped with modern armory storage facilities to mitigate the risk of future explosions in the vicinity. Arise News correspondent Sani Adamu tells more.
Continuing to trail the fire outbreak that caused weapons to explode on Wednesday night in Maiduguri. The explosions, according to the military, was caused by the extreme heat experienced in Maiduguri. The explosion caused pandemonium and chaos among the residents, with many fleeing their homes, thinking it was an attack by insurgents.
It was pathetic. It was devastating. I was panicked. I was thinking that it was something else, but it happens that there was an explosion at the armory. So I think it is something that we don't expect it.
Reacting to the incident, some residents suggest the general renovation of the barracks. Others want the federal government to relocate the barracks from the residential area to the outskirts of the town.
It should be moved to the outskirts of Giwa Barracks because it's been a long time that we've actually experienced this kind of attack, so it kind of feels like all new. So to me, yes, it should be moved to the outskirts.
This kind of thing is just fire outbreak, but you could see how people are affected. Some are even blood pressurized, some are even dead because of this fire outbreak. So if possible, the government should look into this matter so that they can relocate. People will get peace of mind.
While some are of the view that the government should modernize and modify the barracks armory storage to avoid the potential risks of further explosions.
I don't think I am of the opinion that it should be relocated, but rather it should be modernized in a way that the government should invest and make it spacious, and also, if possible, insert soundproof materials so that, God forbid, if anything happens or an explosion happens, they will be able to minimize the level of panic or the level of damages that would happen. So relocating it, I think it's a bad idea. We need them between us in order to secure, to safeguard, and to keep us at peace. Yes.
Instead of relocating them to somewhere, I would rather suggest that they should be given the management of a standard way of managing it. There should be an expertized form of handling the armory.
In 2012, the Giwa barracks experienced a significant attack by Boko Haram insurgents. This incident resulted in the escape of numerous detained Boko Haram terrorists, causing widespread loss of lives and displacement of many people. Sani Adamu, Arise News.
All right, life, they say, has no duplicate. But that's how security-conscious Nigerians have become. Staying with that subject matter, we're now being joined from Arise Abuja studios by Dr. Kabir Adamu, a security and policy analyst, to share his perspective on last week's meeting by United States Ambassador to Nigeria, Richard Mills, with the leadership of Miyetti Allah, the umbrella body of Fulani cattle herders in Nigeria. Good morning, Dr. Adamu. Good to have you join us on the morning show.
Good morning, Steve. I'm delighted to be back here again.
Thank you. Good to have you. All right, let's jump straight into it. There is quite a bit to unpack this morning as far as security, matters are concerned. From the intro that we read and the short clip that we played, I hope that you followed it. There's the question of what is happening in Borno. If barracks are no longer being attacked, but then we have armory, going off in fire, exploding, and people are saying maybe the Giwa barracks, should be relocated. We have the issue of the president in Katsina meeting with security chiefs and, of course, trying to reassure the public about, admitting, of course, that about the enormity of the fight against insurgency and terror, but of course he's saying that no part of Nigeria will be ceded, to terrorists. And of course, the icing on it will be the meeting of the American envoy, Richard Mills, with the leadership of the Miyetti Allah, which a lot of people are talking about with surprise, with, consternation, wondering what the interest of the American embassy will be in directly interfacing with Miyetti Allah. I know that this is loaded, but then start with the Miyetti Allah. What are your thoughts? What's your understanding of what is going on, and how deep do you think we are now in this mess that has just become intractable, in my opinion?
Thank you once again, Steve. So incidentally, I was part of that meeting that held on the 28th of April. And the reasons for the meeting was an interface. I think it's good to lay the foundation so that we're clear about what really happened. In the last few years, there are certain associations, including the US government, that has included the term Fulani as a threat element and as part of the terrorism perpetrators within Nigeria and, of course, within other parts of Africa. And so, as a security expert, as you know, I run a firm, I asked myself, Fulani is an ethnic group. And by our estimate, it represents between 12 to 30 million persons within Nigeria alone. And so when you categorize about 30 million Nigerians as terrorists or terrorist perpetrators, I think it's unfair. It represents a generalization that in the long run will not help anyone. But that does not mean, for instance, that there are no criminals or possibly terrorists within that 30 million. And so when we attempted to isolate the number that could represent that criminal or terrorist portion within the 30 million, it came to about maybe 100,000. So what happened was the coalition of Fulani associations in Nigeria, numbering between about 20 to 35 of such associations, wrote an official letter to the US government saying that yes, they admit that there are criminals or possibly terrorists among them, but that these terrorists do not represent the general group. And so why not find a better framing, a better name as against the generic use of that word Fulanis. And as you know, issues around ethnic profiling, issues around stigmatization, the US government, and in fact any right-thinking person would hold dearly to it. So it was on that basis that the US government decided to hold a meeting to understand better what this coalition of Fulani associations were trying to say. And of course that was discussed, and the US government did in very categorical terms state clearly that developments in Benue, developments in Plateau State were worrisome to it. They felt that perhaps it, based on the narratives they have received from certain quarters, that there is an attempt at either targeting Christians or killing Christians. And then of course the coalition explained to the US government that they themselves are also victims. In fact, they gave the number of Miyetti Allah leaders in several locations in Nigeria, including in Plateau State, that have been killed. That in places like Katsina, in Kwara State recently, that have been killed. They also gave instances of their victimization. The most recent was in Kogi State, where over 100 plus Fulani persons were arrested and then detained illegally, and at the end of it, a substantial number of them were killed. So in summary, it was the meeting in an attempt to discuss a way out by groups that felt they are also victims and that they are interested in fostering peace and interested in finding a better solution than what is currently happening in the country.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting background that you gave. This, from a diplomatic perspective, Dr. Kabir, would you say that this entire meeting is also a reflection on us as a country and our security system in this country? How would you say it reflects? Does it show an inability for us to handle our issues? Of course, we know that there are several sectors within Nigeria that have also had meetings with this same group. So now with the U.S. Embassy saying that, you know, they decided, Ambassador Richard Mills had a meeting with the Miyetti Allah, what does it reflect on us, and how do you think this meeting is going to further improve this farmer-herder clash, especially because a lot of Nigerians are now saying that the victims as well should have their own voice in this situation?
So it's important to emphasize that the victims have their voice. In fact, what led to the meeting is the fact that the perceived perpetrator did not have a voice. I'm sure you probably saw it on different accounts, social media, mainstream media, where a certain clergyman from Benue State attended, I think it was a congressional hearing in the US, and gave an account of what he felt was the types of atrocities committed by Fulanis in Benue State against churches. He listed the number of churches that had been destroyed. So yes, the victim, quote unquote, did have a voice. And what the coalition attempted to do was to say, okay, if you are discussing us, why don't you include us in that discussion too? Because in that particular meeting, that congressional hearing, no Fulani person was listened to. And like I tried to explain earlier, it's, I think, wrong to categorize an entire population, almost about 30 million, categorizing them as criminals or terrorists. So what the meeting attempted to do is to find a better framing for the issue. And it has gone beyond farmer-herder violence. And I think that's one thing that the meeting also established. Perhaps it started as farmer-herder violence, but several components of criminality has now crept in. and it has become institutionalized. One of them is banditry. It's an offshoot of this farmer-herder violence, unfortunately. Another one is cattle rustling. It's also an offshoot. The third or fourth one is kidnap for ransom. And then the fifth one or fourth one, depending on what we're counting, is the role of our security agencies. Unfortunately, that role too has been questioned severally. And to your second part, the second part of the question, the security situation that we have, accountability also was part of the conversations. Both sides, the assumed victim side and the assumed perpetrator side, wants accountability. What that meeting emphasized is that there must be accountability. If anyone commits an offense, irrespective of his ethnicity, of his religion, of his social status, of his political leanings, that person must be arrested and prosecuted. And perhaps the failure to arrest and prosecute is why we're where we are.
All right, Dr. Adamu. Well, I mean, speak to us further about what the meeting with the American envoy actually achieved. I get the point that there was a conversation. I get the point that there was an attempt, to change how the Fulani herdsmen, are perceived. So first question would be, did you succeed with the attempt to have a name change or to have an identity change? What did you agree on, if there was ever an agreement at all? And then secondly, a lot of people will worry that the meeting took place. Yes, you mentioned that it's a coalition of some sort, but then what people are hearing is that it's Miyetti Allah. It's Miyetti Allah. Did the Americans go away with a better understanding of what Miyetti Allah actually does and what it means? Because there were instances, particularly in the immediate past administration of General Buhari, when Miyetti Allah as an association has admitted to certain attacks in a few parts of the country. And so people are careful. People maybe even apprehensive when it comes to discussing Miyetti Allah. What was the understanding of the American ambassador and his team when you met with him about what Miyetti Allah does?
So number one, Miyetti Allah as an association was not discussed. The letter that led to the meeting was written by a coalition of Fulani associations, and like I said, there are between 20 to 35 of such associations. And so the meeting focused on the subject, which is the errant, violent Fulani component within the subgroup that represents the Fulanis, and how perhaps to better frame that errant, violent Fulani component. In terms of what the meeting achieved, first off, it's an exploratory meeting. A letter was written, and then the other side now invited the author of the letter to hear them. And I think from the responses that came from the American side, and by the way, I think it's important to emphasize that the American embassy also had meeting with the farmer associations. So it wasn't just maybe they did not release that on their social media platforms or on their website, but I know that they had meetings with the farmer side. So it wasn't like they had only the herder side, they also had the farmer side, and they also had the Klagi side, the Christian Klagi side. Like I was saying, what the meeting achieved was to agree to continue the conversation so that a better representation is achieved. For one, as a country, and this honestly is a Nigerian responsibility, it's not an American responsibility, Steve, I have to be very clear. We have to find a better framing. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is to perhaps have a convening, bring experts together from within Nigeria, from around the world, and this has nothing again to do with the Americans. It should be something that we as Nigerians should do. Bring experts together, identify the challenge. If you understand sociological challenges, one of the first things to do is to identify the problem. Identify the challenge, find a better framing for it, as against the generic use of the term Fulani herdsmen or Fulani terrorists, that's whatever it is that different cycles call it. Call it what it is without associating it to a religion, without associating it to an ethnic group. Now, when you do that, you succeed in bringing on board the rest of the almost about 29 point something million Fulani persons that are not criminal and that are not terrorists, they will now support whatever intervention you're going to do. The second part, which was also discussed and is very important, Steve, a lot of interventions within Nigeria do not target or do not include the pastoralist. We have to differentiate between the urban Fulanis and then the pastoralist Fulanis. Unfortunately, a significant number of interventions in the country do not include these pastoralist Fulanis. So they are isolated, they don't feel included. A good example, Steve, is the NIN National Identity Registration. As a date, we have not conceived or come up with any specific intervention that would help include this vulnerable population, the pastoralist Fulani population. And if we agree that part of the challenge and the narrative that goes around the country is that there are foreign Fulanis that come in to perpetrate the violence, perhaps one of the best ways to identify those foreign Fulanis is to make sure we register the local ones. But as a country, despite the very strong narrative that goes on within the media space, we haven't even started the registration of that vulnerable population till date. So these are some of the issues that were kind of discussed. No solution was tendered as yet. It's going to be a conversation, and like I said, this is really a local thing. Of course, the U.S. Embassy would not involve itself in any local matter, except with the permission of the Nigerian state. These are issues that as a country we need to. What that meeting sought to do was to perhaps to convince the U.S. government to, instead of categorizing all Fulanis as criminals, as terrorists, find a better narrative to include in their reportage of the issues in Nigeria. It will help foster what we call positive peace as against the kind of negative peace that we have in some places in Nigeria at the moment.
Okay, so Dr. Kabir, two things. So to understand what you're basically saying about this meeting, it did not necessarily address pertinent issues as it pertains to the actual insecurity, but primarily it was focused on putting a stop to the generalization, to say that there must be a clear-cut separation of these groups, to say that all Fulani people are not involved in this crisis that we have seen. I just want to understand that that is what you are saying. Or were there parts of this meeting that also address the issues? So for that sect that is in fact pushing this crisis, just in Plateau, I think this was just last weekend, we saw about 50 different people killed. And the list goes on and on as we take the weeks back. So was any part of that conversation included in this? And was there any update, any solution, any management crisis that was, put up in this meeting with regards to the security lapses?
So yes, the primary purpose of that meeting was to discuss this wrongful generalization and put forward a suggestion that if a better framing, a better term should be searched for. That term is not available at the moment. Like I said, there is a need to convene a gathering of experts to find a better term so that it would be used perhaps going forward. And I think the meeting agreed as a whole that that's good. And now, of course, once the primary purpose of the meeting was concluded, other components were discussed. And as an example, the coalition of Fulani associations reiterated its willingness and desire and support for any peace building process that would bring an end the issues that we're facing in Nigeria. I mentioned earlier on that perhaps even the media has a role to play. This perception that Fulanis are not victims, I think should be changed. I did mention earlier on that Fulani leaders, Fulani traditional leaders, Fulani members or leadership of Magban have been killed of recent. A good example is the one in barracks, who is a leader of the Magban. Magban is the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, one of the coalition members. He was killed. And then, of course, the same thing in Katsina, in Kwara State recently. And I think the question that perhaps even the media should answer and help us focus on is why they targeting and killing leadership of these associations. And the simple reason is this: these are the leaders who are working with the security organizations in an attempt to try to bring an end the violence that we're seeing in those locations. And then, of course, they are being targeted. So there's no protection for them. And the danger for us, and we need to be very mindful of this, is that it may discourage leaders in the future from joining any intervention that is aimed at bringing peace to the country. So in summary, the meeting did discuss other things, but more importantly, it was an exploratory meeting. It was an engagement that is the beginning of perhaps further engagement. But as you know, no embassy would interfere in local matters. So whatever the U.S. embassy is going to do, I'm sure it would have to discuss with the Nigerian state, the Nigerian government, and if the Nigerian government is agreeable, then those things will be. But for now, it's just an engagement. It's an exploratory meeting that perhaps other subsequent and follow-up meetings would occur. Remember, again, and I want to emphasize this, it wasn't only with the HADA groups. Meetings were held with several other groups as well.
All right, I get your point that no conclusions yet as to the sort of framing that the coalition would prefer. But I would like to ask you, Dr. Kabir Adamu, do you have an idea of the sort of framing that you think will suffice by way of suggestion, so that if you're saying that the coalition disagrees with Fulani herders or Fulani terrorists and things like that, what sort of framing is playing in your own head? And then secondly, how is this coalition engaging other stakeholders, particularly within the government functionaries? I'm talking in terms of the National Security Advisor, for example. You mentioned the difference between the pastoralists, and the herders themselves, and then the need for documentation. Who are you tabling this proposal to? And then, are there thoughts, now that the president had a 2-working-day visit to Katsina and is talking security, is concerned about the issues of security, what are you saying to the president? What is your position, the position of the coalition, on open grazing that is really at the heart of the issues of terror and attacks that we've been witnessing?
So starting from the first question, what is my view or the coalition's view on a better framing? In simple terms, Steve and Kachi, it is one that does not include ethnicity. It is also one that does not include religion. So just the same way, for instance, and I think I wouldn't be wrong here, kidnap or the harvesting of organs is more common, that crime is more common in the Southwest, but nobody calls it Yoruba crime. Oil theft is more common in the Niger Delta, but nobody calls it an Ijaw or whatever crime. And then there are several other examples I would give that are more common with certain specific parts of the country. But nobody associates them with ethnicity. And so the framing should be one that does not have ethnicity in it. It should be one that does not have a religion in it. I can't give you an answer at the moment. I did have some ideas and suggestions, but also those ideas and suggestions have been criticized because they included a profession like herders. But one that comes to my mind perhaps is militias. There is no ethnic group in Nigeria at the moment that does not have one or the other form of militia. Steve, I did a research in a part of the South. I wouldn't want to mention where, but I got to find out that communities were collecting levies. They were asked, any member of that community was asked to pay levies. Weapons were being bought by that community. And then, of course, the monies that were collected were used to influence security officials whenever there is an inter-community conflict. It's a conflict over land in a certain part of the South. And so the two communities now started collecting money. And then they have militias that any time there is that conflict, the militias will bring out their weapons. And before you know it, there will be the type of atrocities that we've seen. So perhaps maybe a militia associated with the HADA, but then if some are not comfortable with the fact that the term HADA is being used, because of course that's a profession, and that profession is not specific or unique to a particular ethnic group. And that is why I think there is a need to bring in experts from across the West African subcontinent, from across perhaps even places like Brazil, Australia, that have had a history of pastoralism, so that we hear from them how did they frame their own, and what framing supported peace building. Because I think that is the objective, Steve. We must find a framing that is not isolative, that is not abusive, that does not encourage stigmatization, and that at the same time does not encourage the generalization that may lead, and I say it with all sense of responsibility, to genocide. If you blacklist an entire population of 30 million, we may see instances where innocent persons, and in fact we've seen it in the past. There are instances in Benue State. I remember a particular Fulani group that was traveling from Taraba through Benue. They were killed. In fact, they were incinerated inside their vehicle. Then in Zamfara State, there are several instances where women, Fulani women who come to market, will be targeted, killed, raped, and things that I don't even want to stay on air done to them. Then you remember the case in Plateau State where a certain boss that was traveling, I think from either Gombe or Bauchi State, that there were just Fulanis inside, was stopped, and every person in that vehicle was killed. So there have been instances of specific targeting because of ethnic identity, and it was based on this hatred that the use of that term has emerged. So that's number one. We as yet don't have a solution, a better framing, but when you bring experts together to discuss it, perhaps a better framing can come up. The second part of your question, the president's visit to Katsina and his, I would say, very good and encouraging message to the military. I'm also told he had a meeting with elders and leaders in Katsina, and in that meeting, although it didn't come out in the media, I felt his messaging in that meeting resonates more with me. And what is the messaging? Steve, we have 3 instruments for counter-terrorism in Nigeria. I'll quickly mention them: the National Counter-Terrorism Strategy, the Policy Framework on Countering Violent Extremism, and then our law on the prevention and prohibition of terrorism as amended in 2022. Now, these 3 instruments speak about the all-of-government and the all-of-society approach to managing this challenge that we have. So this is the type of messaging I would love to hear from Mr. President. I would love the coordinators of our national security strategy. You did speak about the National Security Advisor. Remember that a new ministry, the Ministry of Livestock and whatever has been created. I believe that all of these stakeholders have been informed. Letters have been written to them about this issue before in fact, and this is the irony of Nigeria, letters were written to them, and unfortunately they did not respond in the manner that the U.S. Embassy responded, despite the fact that this challenge is ours. So again, I think we must, as a country, take ownership of this challenge. Our leadership, especially the security sector leadership, would need to take up responsibility. That element of accountability, Steve, we need to move ahead, especially, as we're in a democracy, the role of the National Assembly is also critical. If the executive arm is slow, then the legislative arm would also need to play a role in encouraging them to be more speedy. We have a challenge. We can't ignore the challenge. We need to embrace that challenge and to bring it to an end. And how do we do that? It's about positive peace. It's about building a type of inclusion that allows the law-abiding elements within that subgroup to support whatever intervention the government is doing. And I think this is what the letters to these particular agencies that I've mentioned attempted to do.
All right, Dr. Kabir Ademo. So what do you have to say to people who believe that Miyetti Allah is a controversial stakeholder in this conflict? Let me explain. On one hand, leaders from the Middle Belt Forum, I think that's Dr. Pogo, if I'm not mistaken, and some other critics allege that MACBAN has tactically supported or even allegedly openly admitted to violent attacks in the past, which now fills the narrative that they are more perpetrators than just participants. On the other hand, like you've rightly, explained on the show today, Miyetti Allah officials saying that, listen, we are victims too. This is almost generalization of every single person. People look at us as if we are the problem. This association now claims that herders as well have lost over 4 million cattle. This is worth billions of naira to cattle rustling, violence across the country. They have their own issues too. They're saying that they're denying any complicity in any of the recent killings. Now, looking at these two narratives, as a security expert, how do you assess Miyetti Allah's role? Do you see the group as a legitimate part of the peace process that must engage to solve the problem? Or, in a way, would you say it has contributed to the conflict's escalation over the last couple of years?
So let me start by emphasizing that as an individual and as a person, I will never associate with any group, any individual who is perpetrating violence. By the grace of God, last year I was recognized in the Hall of Fame, Global Hall of Fame for Security. And so I'm not just nationally, but I'm internationally recognized, both in terms of my conflict resolution capabilities, in terms of my risk management capabilities, as well as my security management capabilities, as well as peace building capabilities. And so my decision to support this initiative is grounded in the need to find peace in Nigeria. Now, the associations that form that coalition, they are registered formally. All of them have the requisite registration capabilities and, to the best of my knowledge, have not in any way supported violence in any way. Now, that does not mean, for instance, remember I said there are between 22 and 35. The ones that I know and that I am happy and comfortable to associate with fall within those 22. There are others that perhaps we are not so sure. So when you say Miyetti Allah, especially when associations mention Miyetti Allah, they need to be very specific. To my knowledge, there are at least 2 Miyetti Allahs, or even more than that. There is the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, which is Magban. There is the Miyetti Allah Cattle Hori, which is very different. Now, I'm not saying, for instance, that any of them is supporting violence. What I know from my engagement with them is they are supportive of finding a peaceful resolution to the challenge in Nigeria. Are they worried about the lack of accountability? Steve and Kachi, time will not allow me to start to discuss with you the challenges within the pastoralist community in Nigeria. Extortion by the judicial system, lack of accountability. I have monitored instances, involved myself as my company, instances where the pastoralist communities would be arrested over an offense that was committed perhaps by someone else, and then a long cycle of extortion will now be the case of the day. The extortion will probably start from a local security unit up to the state security unit and then brought down to the federal security unit over an issue that the pastoralists had no knowledge of. So I'm not justifying the response of that community. All I'm saying is that there are institutional and structural challenges that as a country we need to address, that over time, because we haven't addressed them, it has created this monster that we believe. The second point that we need to, the two sides will need to also discuss is these state-level vigilantes that are not representative. They don't include the different ethnic groups. Let me use Zamfara as an example. Zamfara is a community that you have, to a larger extent, a balance between the Fulanis and the Hausas. Now, vigilantes have been created. That does not include the Fulanis. And so constantly you hear the need when the Fulanis are discussing to say, include us in those vigilantes, include the law-abiding component in those vigilantes. So my call to the two sides is to come together, the law-abiding components of the two sides, because let's remember, Kachi, it doesn't mean, for instance, that there are no criminals within the other group. There are criminals in both groups, and these criminals are exploiting the gaps that exist between the two sides. So my call to them, come together, agree to foster peace, and then identify the criminals among the two groups, and then as one, target those criminals. And it's doable, because those criminals have mothers, they have fathers, everybody would know who the criminals are. And if the two sides come together, it will be very easy to now ensure and put pressure on the government to arrest and prosecute the criminals amongst them. So starting point is to drop this, I would say, negative stereotyping, let the two sides come together and foster a common agreement, as it were, on how to find a solution to this problem. Nobody is benefiting from the problem at the moment.
Absolutely, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Criminals or militias, I believe that we all agree that the Nigerian state needs to tackle this menace that everybody is talking about. But we want to thank you, Doctor, for your insightful analysis and good time with us on the morning show today.
So guys, you have seen it for yourself. Yes, I love the fact that, the United States might be trying to make sure there is peace in Nigeria. But guess what? These people do not understand that language called peace. We have here in Nigeria, so many states pass into law the anti-open grazing bill. Why is it not being respected? Why is it not being? You need to see, there was this time when Tinubu arrested Miyetti Allah leader. Do you know what Miyetti Allah said? Tinubu, do not push us to the wall. Tinubu, do not push us to the wall. That's what they came out to tell Tinubu, that he shouldn't push them to the wall. So these are a very few group of persons, but the level to which they own this country is alarming. Now, in Plateau State, the governor came out to say 64 communities taking over. Nobody is doing anything, be it from the government, be it from individuals, be it from religious leaders. Nobody is doing anything. These people have been permanently displaced to spend all their lives in IDP camp, and nobody is even capturing them in the budget. Some of these states said they depend on United Nations. Nobody is capturing them. Our leaders are busy buying jets, buying yachts, traveling, and giving all kinds of excuses why the money they have borrowed cannot be traced and be found to be useful for Nigerians. They are not capturing those they left in the IDP camps in their budget. And nobody is making an attempt to go sack those Fulanis, bring back these people back to their communities. So guys, a whole lot is happening in this country. We don't have anything called leader. And until we start holding these people responsible, I don't think they will wake up to the reality of, leadership is all about the people, Anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Please give this video a like so that YouTube can recommend it to others, and drop your thoughts.